Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this McGraw-Hill Education webinar, Stimulate Early Learning with Phonemic Awareness Activities Throughout the Day. I'm Jenny Anderson with McGraw-Hill Education, and I will be the webinar moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping items. This webinar is being presented in listen-only mode, which means you will be able to hear the presenter, but he won't be able to hear you. However, that doesn't mean you cannot participate. We, of course, want to hear any questions you have, so go ahead and type those into the Q&A box on the screen. Joining us today is Jeff Omer. Jeff is a Senior National Literacy Curriculum Specialist with McGraw-Hill Education. In his role, he works at the school and district level to support the implementation of research-validated instructional practices to improve student achievement. Over the years, he has presented at many state and regional conferences around the country focusing on literacy, mathematics, and the integration of technology into the classroom. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jeff. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Jenna. Appreciate it. And thank you all for joining me today. As Jenna said, my name is Jeff Omer, and I'm excited we have so many people joining us to talk about phonological and phonemic awareness and what are some things we can do throughout the day to help reinforce and teach these skills for our students. And when we're thinking about phonological and phonemic awareness, we know that this is not a new skill. This is not a new concept. It's been a discussion for years, and it keeps coming back to the forefront because we keep on having children that come with deficits in these areas. So we're going to talk about it a little bit. I'm going to set the playing field a little level so we're all talking about using the same language, just so we can keep moving on and get the most out of this session. Like I said, thank you so much for joining us. And those of you that teach middle grade students, like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade students, this skill is usually a skill that we usually focus on when we're talking about our primary students, our K1s, our pre-Ks, our 2nd graders maybe. But we know that we have some of our 3rd graders and 4th graders that have some needs in these areas too. So we're going to talk about some ways we can help those students out as well that may need that extra support, that extra help to close those gaps that we need. Because we know that if we have the gap in kinder, we know by the time they get to 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, then we have huge holes that we need to fill. As some of you did already, please be sure to keep chatting in the chat window. Earlier I asked where you're joining us from because we have such a large group. I love to see where everyone's joining us from. We have a huge group from all over the place, from all over the country, East Coast, West Coast, as I see everywhere. Friends of Myrtle Beach, I know you have a hurricane out there, so be careful. But the idea today is to keep the interaction going. So as we're talking, please be sure to type those questions in the chat window when I ask you, and also the questions. If you have a question you want us to address, please be sure to type in that question window so we can definitely address that question either during the webinar or as soon as it's over if we run out of time. But let's go ahead and get started and get the most out of this. Again, please interact as much as possible so you get the most out of this session. So the goals today, as we talk today, we're going to talk about the importance of developing phonological phonemic awareness. Why is it such a big deal? We're going to talk a little bit about the difference between phonological and phonemic awareness. What is the difference? Is it the same? We'll talk about that for a minute. And we'll also spend the most time talking about activities. What are some things you may be doing in your classroom now? Or what are some things you can easily incorporate in your daily routines that will make this skill, these concepts, easy for your students to understand and easy for you to implement as well, because we know your day is full and we want to make sure you get the most out of it. So as we're talking, I'm going to give you some ideas, but please, if you have some that you love to share and you love to do in your classroom, please go ahead and do that as well. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, what is it? We're talking about phonological phonemic. What are we talking about here? When we talk about this skill, what's our focus? And the first thing we're going to talk about is the fact that we want to start with phonological awareness, because that is that broad term. A lot of folks use the umbrella term, but it's a broad skill that includes identifying and manipulating units of language. It's dealing with those larger parts such as words and syllables and even talking about some sounds. But the idea of phonological awareness, it is that much broader term. And we think about this because we also think about our struggling students, the ones that are having an issue. Think about that 3rd grader that can't rhyme, or the 3rd grader that doesn't understand how many syllables in a word. That all started with here with phonological awareness, understanding those sounds. So it's so important that when we talk about this, we make sure that all of our students develop this foundation. Many times, phonological awareness, this is the most basic of general term, but these skills are usually developed very young, preschool, pre-K, even before then. Anytime you're reading and working with children, these, especially when you're working with nursery rhymes and poems and chants, you're really developing these important skills. And the idea is to make sure we build this foundation in phonological phonemic awareness in kinder and pre-K, so that when we get to first, second, third, we can just solidify it and move on. When we talk about phonemic awareness, this is the most complex of those terms under phonological awareness. But when you go to phonemic awareness, now we're talking about breaking that's concepts of words into individual sounds or phonemes, the smallest unit that has meaning within a word. That's what we're talking about here. According to Merriam-Webster, I Googled it just to make sure we're all speaking the same language. And the idea is that, according to Merriam-Webster, the simple definition is the smallest unit of speech that can be used to make one word different from another word. So sit to bit, that one unit, that's the difference between the two. So when we're looking at this, we want to look at this awareness in words and the ability to manipulate those sounds within words. It's challenging for some students. That's why when you're working with these activities, it's important to make sure that we scaffold these skills appropriately to make sure our students develop the concepts they need when they need to develop them, which is so important. So the two critical areas, the two critical tasks when we're talking about phonemic awareness, we're going to talk a little bit about oral blending and segmentation. Oral blending are those skills that help them become better readers, and segmentation are those important skills that help them break apart those words and become better spellers. So those two pieces come together really to make sure our students have that solid foundation. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we do this. The first thing to think about, though, before we start talking about even implementing any phonemic awareness activities, there are some quick tips that we always suggest to teachers when even with parents, when they're working with these activities. That's important. The first thing we want to make sure you keep in mind is that pace is absolutely critical for these activities. Phonological and phonemic awareness activities should be very quick. They shouldn't take a long time. They shouldn't be 25 and 30 minutes. It should be quick, fast-paced activities. So keep that first piece in mind. Keep the pace up. The benefit of that is your students that are on the cusp of getting it, they're engaged because they're listening carefully for the sounds as you're blending them together, or the sounds as you're breaking apart. And the students that got it already, they're engaged because they get it and they're going to keep moving with you. And the students that are really struggling, they're hearing the repetition and the practice and they're learning on the side. So do know that all these places come together to really help your students. So first, pace is huge. And I already mentioned it a second ago, repetition. Be sure you keep that. You're going to repeat things over time, not in one day, but over the course of a week or 2 weeks. You're going to repeat some different concepts because you want to give your students some time to practice, develop the skill, practice a little more, develop a little skill over time. So be sure it's okay to repeat it over days. That's fine. If you're going to practice rhyming, repeat it over several days. You don't have to do it all in one day. The other thing is, of course, is have fun. Kids love having fun. My children, when I was a kinder first grade teacher, my students loved the activities and they loved playing with sounds. They loved changing words, even with their nonsense words. It was fun for them to change trampoline to bampoline and nampoline. It's fun for them to do things like that. So you have fun with it too. So keep that in mind as well. And also, of course, we want to make sure that when you're doing phonemic awareness activities and phonological awareness activities, remember, these activities are designed to be done, as we always say, in the dark. 99% of the time, it's about the sounds. It's nothing about the print. It's not about reading the words. It's not even about the definitions of the words. It's about just playing with the words and playing with sounds and training our ears to become better listeners. And if you think about your students, you have some of them that just need to help practice to become better listeners, and that's what this is going to do for them. And it's critical. One thing we always mention is be very careful on pronunciation. I say that because if we mispronounce things when we do things here, it's going to extend way down the road when they're coming down to do other activities. So be sure, especially on the stop sounds, the b and the d and the all those stop sounds, the b, the d, the p, those sounds, be sure you stop that. Be careful with the schwa going at the end, because if we say ba-a-b, what's the word? We don't want them to say ba-a-b, we want them to say baby. So again, quick things, quick tips about that to really keep in mind. Let me ask you, if you were thinking about this, if you were telling a brand new teacher, or say you're just out of college and you learned in college or grad school, what would you suggest to somebody? Go ahead and type it down. If I missed something or something you want to add, go ahead and type it in as well, because again, this has to be interactive. So yes, we want to make sure we keep pronunciation, and we're very careful about what we're doing with it. Of course, the next thing we're going to talk about, yes, we have these skills. Yes, they're so important. Why are they important? Well, we know that research tells us, and Reading Rockets is a great little website. If you haven't gone there, Reading Rockets is a great place to go to get some great information. But research tells us that phonological phonemic awareness is a critical foundation. Yes, for reading, for writing, for spelling. We know that it's a big foundation. It's important that we understand that as educators, that this is a big deal, that it's important that our students understand these skills and understand that, yes, they can be confident without developing this completely, but students that have gaps here usually have reading gaps as well. We know that phoneme awareness is connected to reading and spelling success, and it facilitates the growth into word recognition. So when we're thinking about our students and you're working with word knowledge and words and sight words and all those other skills you're teaching, remember this is another area we want to keep in mind, because we know that poor readers by large struggle with these skills. That's why when you've done some screening assessments that you have in your school, in your building, it's important to know that these skills are really important, and we know that the struggling readers are lacking in those. And we can identify this early in kindergarten, early in first grade. We can identify this in pre-K where the gaps are. And when we identify these gaps, then we can do things right away to fix it. So that's what we know about reading. We know that it's important. We know it's a big deal. So now let's start talking about what can we do in our classroom. What are some activities that you can do to help? And I did see some awesome, great feedback. Before I move on, I asked you to type in some feedback, and we definitely got some. Rebecca, thank you. Watch out for those fun songs on YouTube. They often mispronounce sounds. Great point. Great point. And Sean, has to be systematic. You need a lot of direct instruction. Exactly. We want to teach these skills explicitly and systematically. We don't want to just randomly pull activities, because online you can find a lot of good stuff and a lot of not so good stuff. So be very careful. Thank you so much for chiming in and giving your thoughts and feedback. So let's go ahead and dive in a little bit. Let's talk more about these phonological awareness activities. And when we're starting to talk about phonological awareness activities, remember we're focusing on the larger units of language, focusing on words and syllables and rhymes. And research tells us that the knowledge of phonological awareness is a huge, it's a basis for our phonics instruction later. Because if we understand sounds, think about it, if you understand sounds and how sounds work, then it definitely is easier when we start teaching phonics and sound letter correspondences. It's a lot easier. That's why a lot of programs out there, a lot of resources you see in the field will take some time before they start teaching the phonics, is to make sure that phonological phonemic awareness is solid. Because if it's not solid, then you're building challenges for yourself down the road. So just something to keep in mind as we move on through this. So when we start talking about phonological awareness, the one area that I always recommend, and you do it as well, is think about the poems and nursery rhymes that you've always used in your classroom. Poems and nursery rhymes are a fantastic way to develop this early phonological awareness, because what it does for our students is it teaches them the rhythm of our language. How do our sounds sound? How does our language sound? How do books sound? How do stories sound? Think about you and your own experiences. You love hearing songs and stories and rhymes and chants because there's a rhythm to them. And we want our children to learn that. So the one thing to remember is, please think about those poems and nursery rhymes. Think about the ones that your kids love and incorporate those into your activities on a daily basis. Again, this is something that doesn't have to be during ELA time. It could be any time during the day, because you have those chants and songs and rhymes in your head. If you have a favorite one your students love, please go ahead and type that in too, because again, that's another great way to share ideas with each other. So yes, think about those nursery rhymes and poems that you're doing, because that is an overarching, wonderful activity, wonderful tool, wonderful thing that I'm sure many of you use already, but it's a great thing to do. And then when we start talking about rhyming and playing with it later, you can use and adjust these rhymes and poems to do more activities with them. So keep that in mind as we keep going on. Another thing, thinking about looking at listening for sounds. Early on, the earliest, before we even start talking about larger parts of words, one of the things that we did in our classroom, my first day teaching kindergarten, my first day of teaching, I remember having my students close their eyes and just listen. What do you hear? What's that sound behind you? Many of us are in the beginning of the school year right now. You just started, or you're starting after the holiday, you're starting this week. Think about how you can teach these important skills, or especially if you're a kinder or even a pre-K teacher, even first grade, teaching them to listen for sounds. And of course, it starts with just having them close their eyes and listen. What do you hear? My classroom was right across from the office, so they would hear the doorbell ring. They'd hear the phone ring. They'd hear Miss Jones talking. They'd hear Miss Smallwood talking. They'd hear people talking. And that's huge because we want them to remember that you need to listen. And then as times go on, then you start adding two sounds. But when you do the sounds, you want again to close your eyes and maybe do the, and then have them say, what did you hear first? What did you hear last? Great idea. Great way to do it. Great way to get that practice of first and last. And you can use environmental sounds, dropping a book, clapping your hand, snapping your finger, ripping a piece of paper, crumpling, whatever it is. But it's training them to do that early listening. This is something that's skipped many times. And then you, of course, go to more sounds. 3 sounds, first, last, middle. Great places to go to let them practice listening, getting their ears ready, getting their ears focused on listening and learning. A great thing to do. And of course, then you can go to the missing sounds. What did I miss? If I did 3 and only did 2, what's missing? The middle sound, the first sound, the end sound. Tightly scaffolded activities, as we mentioned earlier, as I think Sean mentioned earlier, you have to have it tightly sequenced, tightly scaffolded to make sure we build that foundation. So yes, think about the sounds, think about how you're scaffolding it. That is really important when we're building that early phonological awareness. And there's some great activities, ideas popping up in the chat window. Keep an eye on that. I'm going to visit that in a few minutes. So listening and sounds is very basic because then we want to jump into listening for those words. Words in the sentences. Again, starting with the short sentences, but making sure that we teach them that, okay, we're listening to the word, and we start saying, the boy is here. How many words are in that sentence? The boy is here. 4 words. Something like that is great to do. Now, again, easy extensions, clapping it out. The boy is here. We know that physical movement is important for some of our students. Of course, you can always connect it to math, too, and using some chips, and you slide chips up or an L-Conan box. The boy is here. Starting with those large parts lets them know that if we can see things in larger pieces, the whole word, then we can break it down into sounds later, but we have to start bigger. So yes, we start with something 4 words, 5 words, 6 words, and go to longer. But again, great easy extensions for you as you're teaching, as you're doing these activities, is to have them clap, have them stamp it out, have them jump it out, whatever you want to do. But those are great ways to extend that learning for your students. Again, how many words? So remember, we're going from the bigger, listening just for sounds. Now we're listening for words. We're getting a little bit more discrete, but that's, again, part of that important progression that you're taking your students through. And then of course, as times progress, you are going to spend time on syllables. Using picture cards is great. Sometimes you'll do activities where you actually cut a picture card in half and have, like, you have a baseball there. You may have baseball, put it together. What do you have? Baseball, things like that. So they can see that, again, starting with the larger units, now we're crinkling a little bit further down. Starting with compound words is easy because with that scaffold you're providing your students, if they may not get the words, beehive, what's the word beehive, they're seeing that too. So there's that visual connection too that also helps them. So think about those activities when you're working with your students, giving them time to develop that skill. But remember, don't go here too fast. Take your time. I always tell kinder teachers especially, it's worth it to take a couple extra days to make sure this foundation is solid. Because if we do a good job here, then our students are going to be so much better off later. But if we go too fast here and we leave 6 of our kids behind here with this early concept of understanding sounds, then when these four kindergartners get to Christmas time or holiday time or January or February, what's going to happen? We're going to be worried about them. So take the time now Take the extra time. Make sure you do those extra activities. So you start with bigger, then you start scaffolding it down a little bit further until you get to working with syllables. And of course, silly sentences are always a blast. Sally and Sue sing on Sundays. Great things you do as well. Again, develop more of the phonological, the awareness of sounds and how sounds work together. And I already mentioned this before with rhyming and nursery rhymes and chants, but this is a great thing to do to kind of solidify this. These should be going on all year long. Kinder, first grade, you should be using rhyming and chants all year long. So, of course, the question I asked before is, what are your favorite activities? What are the ones that you love to do the most? And I'm seeing here, what is a poem? Sean, great idea. Someone also mentioned, Sarah mentioned using mirrors. An excellent idea to see how the sounds, how you make those sounds. It's an excellent idea. Dr. Seuss, Laura, Debbie, absolutely. Great ideas. Mother Goose, awesome ideas. Use a color, sticky notes, and cubes for sounds. Great idea, Lorena, sorry. Great idea. Using, chips or counters or cubes, anything we can do to help our students understand that awareness. Finger plays are fantastic. There are a million great ones out there, but those are great things to do. And Sean, absolutely. Raps and cheers are great for our older students, because remember, we have older students that when you say, what's the first sound you hear in the word, or what do you hear, not even what do you hear at the beginning of the word, they don't even understand that. So definitely making it fun for them. Raps and cheers are great ways to do that. All fantastic activities, great ways to engage our students to build this solid foundation for them. So absolutely keep the chats coming, keep the ideas coming. Fantastic. Sandra, great idea. FCRR.org is fantastic. The Florida Center for Reading Research is a fantastic idea. It's a great place to go to find some great activities. They're all research-based. That's a great website. FCRR.org is fantastic. And I have on the slide here talking about games and songs. Think about some games and songs that you sing in your classroom. The whisper game is fun because you can whisper something to one student and see how it travels around the room. See how many students come up with new words, different words, exciting words. All fantastic ideas. The ship is loaded with, kind of like what Sarah talked about, nursery rhymes with the similar sound, ba ba, black sheep. Things like every time you hear a sound, you celebrate things. Ship is loaded with is a fun game because you can use that for the ship is loaded with boys and toys and every word that rhymes with it, or words that start with string and songs and silly putty or whatever. Also, Down by the Bay. I know a lot of you know Down by the Bay or Willie Bee Wallaby Woo. Raffi songs are always great connections because they teach those rhythmic rhymes for our students. So again, other songs you have, please keep the chats coming. I love the discussion going on. But just think about this. As we're looking at the activities, we're looking at the games, think about all the different games and songs. These are easy to incorporate throughout the day. Very easy to tie throughout the day. Sorting pictures by sounds. An easy thing to do. Again, we're not connecting S to S, anything like that. We're just saying what's it start with, or things like that. Great ways to connect with reviewing everything you've learned, everything you can learn, and everything you can review with those activities. Sarah asked a question. You've never heard of the game Ship is Loaded With. What you do is you go around the room and you tell your students the ship is loaded with, and it's going to be rhyming words. So the ship is loaded with toys. So every student in the group has to come up with a word that rhymes with toys. Toys, boys, joys. It can even be made up words. That's fine because it's about teaching them how to rhyming. So Ship is Loaded With is a fun game. My kids loved it because we sat in a circle. We just passed it around. And once I knew we were kind of done with the word, we'd switch to words. So you can do that with rhyming words. You can do that with initial sounds in words. You can do it with a lot of different words, a lot of different activities. But those are great ways to really practice that early phonological awareness and those early skills. Because what's going to happen, Nancy, excellent idea. Your district uses Reading Wonders, and there's so many great activities in that program. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of great resources in Reading Wonders. Great tools there. Open Court Reading has some great resources there. We even have a program called Phonemic Awareness that just teaches phonemic awareness. So there are pieces out there depending what the needs are, but there are a lot of tools out there that are even free that you can access online. So thanks for sharing that, Nancy. Let's dive into phonological. Now we've done phonological. Phonemic awareness is the most complex of the phonological awareness skills. That's why it's got its own little world out there. And when we think about this, now we're going to dive into just focus on the individual phonemes and sounds and words. And what I want you to think about and remember that we're talking about words and sounds, and we're going to the individual phonemes. Our goal is to get to the phoneme, the individual part of those words. And it is about listening. It is about our students getting their ears ready. So it's an excellent way to go. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is, again, phonemes are that smallest unit of sound, the smallest thing we want to work on. That's what we're going to focus on. And we're going to focus on two big areas. Remember, oral blending helps us become better readers. Segmentation helps them become better spellers. And both of these are going to be kind of taught simultaneously over time. You're going to teach one and the other, kind of keep them coming back and forth, but it's a great thing to do to really keep your students engaged and scaffold on top of what we've always learned, because it's beyond just rhyming. It's going a little bit further than that. And that's what you're going to see here. So let's talk about this for a minute. There's a sequence, as Sean mentioned earlier, there's a sequence we want to think about with our students. It's not just about, oh, let's just do some oral blending activities. It's about making sure we develop that skill so they can do this oral blending activities. So we start with large word parts. And then as we develop that ability to do word parts, then we go into focus on initial and finding sounds. And then once we feel comfortable with that, we start weaving in activities where we're replacing the sounds. So you change a word by changing the first sound. As I mentioned that definition, if you change one sound, the word changes. That's important skill. And then we spend time on single syllable words and replacing the vowel sounds, which is very complex. But I watched some kinders do it last year. It was amazing watching them do the activities. Just replacing vowel sounds, dropping medial sounds. It was amazing what they can do. So if you teach these skills and you follow this sequence, your students will have easy time building these skills and building these concepts. So the first, and again, many people use a puppet or a handheld device for the students to focus on when they're doing phonological phonemic awareness activities. I always had a puppet similar to this in my classroom, but you can use anything. A puppet, hands are always good, a great point of emphasis for your students. But something like this, again, these words would take me about 20 seconds. And for my students, if I had the puppet, I'd say cinnamon or cinnamon. What's the word? Cinnamon. Or if you have older students, you can just do alphabet. What's the word? Alphabet. Something like that. Now, even this activity, I want you to notice that this isn't a syllable break, it's a word part break. And there's a reason we start here. This gives us a clue. Cinnamon is the break, not quite on a syllable, but the first part of that word gives the students a clue on what the whole word's going to be. Again, it's that scaffolding that you're doing. So when you do cinnamon, the students, even if they may not understand what I'm completely doing, they know, oh, it's probably cinnamon. So it's a great connection. Over time, this goes from, I can figure out the word from just hearing the first part to not, as the scaffold goes. Remember, these are fast-paced activities. A list of 10 to 15 words like this would take you maybe a minute and a half. That's it. Cinnamon. What's the word? Cinnamon. Alphabet. What's the word? Alphabet. You want to give them that time to think, but you don't want to take forever, and you don't want to have a big discussion with your first graders about cinnamon and what they like cinnamon on. Uh-oh. Looks like I might be frozen. Let me check and make sure. Let me refresh my screen. Hold on a second. All right, we're back. Okay, thank goodness. I got worried there for a minute. Okay, so what I want you to think about with these activities is, I don't know where I fell off, so I'm going to start a little bit again, is when you're doing any of these phonemic activities, keep the pace going. Keep your kids moving. Keep it engaging. Don't spend 20 minutes talking about what they like to have cinnamon on, because that's not the point of the activity. So just keep that in mind, because that's the one thing I see happening in a lot of classrooms, is we have a discussion on September and what's your favorite month and whose birthday's in September, instead of just doing the words. And it's going to scaffold. As we move on, it goes from those big parts of the words. Now we're going to do activities like this with a beginning sound. And notice when we're going to start the activities, it starts with dropping off those beginning blends. So I'm going to do trampoline. What's the word? Trampoline. Breakfast. What's the word? Breakfast. Things like that. But again, it's about that scaffolding of instruction. We started with bigger parts. Now we're coming to smaller parts, dropping off some beginning blends. And then we're going to go further. We just have the beginning sound, focusing on the word, focusing some more on the onsets and rhymes activities. That's exactly what you're doing here. Making sure that we have that foundation in place, because you're going to spend time doing activities, building those initial sounds. And over the course of the year, not even the year, over several weeks, it goes from just the beginning sound of words to then focusing on the ending sound of words. Superman. What's the word? Superman. Absolutely. So those are some things you're going to do. Part of that scaffold. Again, it's not that everyone doesn't teach phonemic awareness. The big thing I always remind people is keep your eyes on the prize and keep your eyes on the sequence. Your students won't be ready for Superman. What's the word? Superman, right at the beginning of the year. So we want to scaffold that maybe a week or two in, then they're ready because we built that awareness of sounds. So keep that in mind as you're working with your students. Start big, go small, and go to start bigger units and scaffold there. And then as time progresses, you do activities like this where you're replacing the initial sound. And this is a place where writing could happen, where you could write a word. But it's not about reading the word. It's me telling my students that this is hamburger. What's it say? And everyone would say, of course, hamburger. And my question is, what if I change the initial sound from to a s or a t? Then what happens is you drop to, what's the new word? Samburger. So I'm saying the word, then I'm writing the word. If I change the first sound to a t, what would it be then? Tamburger. Excellent. This would say Tamburger. And that's where we do something like that. So I'm not reading the word. I'm just using it to show that we're changing the sound of the word. So please don't think that we're reading the word Tamburger and we're teaching words that aren't real words. It's about manipulating sounds. So yes, it starts with doing those activities with the beginning sounds, then spending some time doing the activities with the ending sound. Superman, or supermad, or supermat. All those great things to work on there. And I'm going to look at some chat because I saw some good things pop up. Judith made a great comment that make sure we don't have that vowel sound added, the schwa sound. Be very careful. That's a great point, Judith, that we don't do that when we're doing these activities. The ship is loaded with. Great. Thanks, Anne, for bringing that up and reminding us the directions. Excellent idea. Excellent description. And Sarah made a great point, too, to start with the stop sounds, the b, the d, the d. Those words, those sounds are great ones to work with. So thinking about this sequence, we do want to make sure we scaffold our students. We want to start big. Remember, we started these activities thinking about just the sounds and the bigger sounds of words. Then we've scaffolded slowly from parts of words to beginning sounds to ending sounds. Now we're replacing sounds and getting to the point where we can do activities where we're doing some oral blending of words. So this is where you can even start. Again, it's about the scaffold. Start with the boy was hungry. He wanted some fish. What did he want? Fish. We start that because we want to give them context to the words. It keeps them engaged, but it also is a scaffold for our students. Because in the beginning, we do want to give them stories. We want to build that story around it. But over the course of time, that story goes away. So I just say, okay, here's the word sit. What's the word? Sit. Or boy. What's the word? Boy. Activities like that are fantastic for building the skills, but they're only fantastic if they're ready for them. And too many times we do it when they're not ready for them, and then we have half our students looking at us because they don't get it. So be sure we take our time, but by about 20 lessons or so, you're doing this easily. And this is easy. All these activities, when you do with older students, they're easy to do. You just use your hands instead of using Puppet. You talk about it. You do. I mean, again, even faster with older students. But these 5 minutes you're investing, 10 minutes you're investing to do these activities will get you tons of return at the end of the day. So be sure to do that when you're focused on those activities that you're doing. And of course, you do activities like this further down the road more, I know. But think about this. Changing those initial sounds. So if you change a to alligator, what'd you change to a? What would it be then? Alligator, alligator. And as time progresses, you can change middle vowel sounds as well. And when you teach your students, when they build their ears up to listen, they can do these activities. And some of you know a wonderful song you can sing when you're doing replacing the vowel sounds. A great little song is Apples and Bananas. I know everyone knows that song. If you don't, Google it. It's a fun song. But you say apples and bananas, apples and bananas, opals and bononos. Replacing vowel sounds is fun manipulating activity. But those are part of those activities and part of that scaffold that we really want to make sure our students do. So when you think about this, we think about these oral blending activities. How can we do it throughout the day? Well, the idea is tie it throughout the day. Make oral blending activities part of your regular activities. You can do it in math. You can do it in science. It's easy to do. I like doing things like this when we're in the hallway. We're waiting in line. We're lining up. Great ways to do it because it's about teaching them that you're sounding out words all day long. Okay, I want j, to get in line. Who want to get in line? Jenna, so Jenna gets in line. Things like that are great, fun ways for students to really focus on the sounds and then tie things back together. So lining up while you're waiting in line in the hallway, a great activity you can do while your students are standing, while they're waiting in the hallway, while they're being very quiet and you're not getting them to look at you. You do activities, you go, okay, ready? Alphabet. What's the word? Alphabet. It keeps your kids engaged and it keeps them from doing other things that we don't want them doing. And my students, we had workshop time, any small group time. There are great things you can do in small groups too. Great activities. I know there's a lot of worksheets out there you can use as well, but the more manipulating you can do with your students, the better. So again, think about all these ways you can incorporate these oral blending activities throughout the day. My biggest thing to remember is don't forget about the sequence. Be sure the sequences fall, because and again, there's a lot of good stuff out there on the internet, but there's also a lot of not so good stuff. And if you get something that has you bouncing all over the place, then it's not going to be as beneficial for your students because you're not going to solidify the skills. And remember, keep the pace up and don't worry about repeating. You can repeat it with new words if you want to. So it's a great way to do it. So the next step is, we talked about oral blending. Again, think about where we got to when we're going snap. We teach them how to blend the words together, or blend the sounds together, sorry. The next thing we want to focus on are those segmentation activities. And this is an area that, again, many times it's kind of forgotten about. Oh yeah, segmentation. Or oh yeah, let's clap out some syllables and call it a day. This is how you get your students to become super spellers. Segmentation. Because if you teach your students how to break apart words from syllables all the way down to initial sounds of the words, they'll be able to spell just about anything. About 87% or so, I've heard, of our language is decodable. If we teach them how to sound out words and break it down like this, they'll be able to do it, but we have to teach them. Because if we don't show them how to do it, they may not be able to do it. So yes, it starts with doing activities with syllables. Great. Sean had another great idea. Sean, you're wonderful. A lot of great ideas out there. Sean mentioned Chipper Chat by Super Duper Publications. Awesome guide for sequencing activity. Make sure that sequence is there. So think about this with breaking things apart into syllables. We want to work on syllable work. You start names of students. My kids love clapping out their names. And even your pre-Kers love clapping out their name. They learn clap out their name. It makes life easy. Jeffrey, 2 syllables, makes life easy for them. Then, of course, you get harder, more complex words, but they can do it because this foundation for spelling begins when we can clap out the syllables. Because you also teach them, when we learn the syllables, that every syllable has a vowel sound. So that's going to help their spelling even more, because there's every syllable has a vowel sound and a vowel spelling. It's going to help their spelling immensely. So again, in my classroom, yes, it's clapping. Yes, it's marching. Yes, it's tapping words out. Looking at those words and breaking them into syllables is an awesome way to do it, to keep our kids engaged, to keep our kids moving, keep our kids excited. So yes, start the syllable work basics. Start with their names. Sorry, my dog's over here whining. The other thing I want you to do is think about the next layer. And the next layer is teaching students how to start breaking those words apart, breaking those sounds apart. So onsets and rhymes are another great thing. And again, you can use your puppet for activities like this, or just, again, with your older students, just do activities like, okay, I say sight, the puppet says ite. What did he forget? S. Or if I say sight, the puppet says s. What did he forget? Ite. Teach them to work with those onsets and rhymes. The initial sound, and then the rhyme is the part of the word, including the vowel at the end. So a great activity, great suggestion, great connection is right there thinking about working with onsets and rhymes. And again, I'm giving you an example here using a puppet. So I say nice, the puppet says the class says ice, the word's nice. Do activities like that. The puppet, if you use a puppet, it should be fun. It should be engaging. The puppet has a personality of his own. For some reason I forgot to pull my puppet out, but you want to have that puppet engage with your students. So yes, we want to do activities like this where we focus on the initial sound, but down the road, the puppet also works with the ending sounds. I say soon, the puppet says sue, the class says soon. Activities like that, teach them to cut those sounds. The ending sounds for everything are always the hardest, because as we speak as adults, as grown people, we cut off the last sounds a lot. Think about when you talk. This comes in when we do oral blending, but also with segmentation. That's when you look at some of the way your students spell. They're not spelling correctly because they're dropping that last sound off, because they're saying the last sound and not saying last sound D. So be careful when you're doing these activities to really emphasize those initial and final sounds. They're all great things you can do. And of course, you also want to spend some time dealing with those initial blends and having the puppet and having the class. The puppet models the class does it. I say sty, drop off the initial sound. What do you have? Tie. I say skin, drop off the initial sound. What do you have? Kin. All those things are great things you can do. Again, it's about that scaffold. This is complex. This is not an easy skill. But when you teach your students these skills, the great thing is they're going to learn how to do this, because if I can manipulate those sounds better, then what's going to happen is my students are going to be able to become better spellers because they're going to hear more of the sounds in the words. So I say sty to tie, I say skin to kin, I say spell to pel, I say flip to lip. They are able to do that. I was in another classroom in Connecticut last spring and watched this kindergarten class drop off the medial consonant sound and figure out the new word. So if I say the word was sty, they would drop off the t and they'd say sigh. I'd say spell, they drop off the p and they'd say sell. That means they have understanding of sounds and they're on the track to success. So that's a huge, awesome thing to do in your classroom. And of course, I keep on saying of course, I'm sorry, but throughout the day, there are a lot of things you can do throughout the day to work on phonological in this phonemic awareness and segmenting. The first thing you want to think about when thinking about is clapping out your names. Great way to get in line, great way to line students up. Clap out, have them clap their names out, have them clap out words. This is also going to be helpful when you work with any students when you're talking about spelling. If you can teach them to clap out words, clap out what you're trying to spell, and then connect it to the spelling, wait till you see what happens with your scores. They're going to be wonderful because they're going to be spellers and not memorizing words for Friday. Another thing you can do, segmenting during the day, activities like I have here. I'm thinking of a word with 4 syllables, and it means the same as this. Or I'm thinking of a word that has 2 syllables. Let them think about words. Let them, again, it builds vocabulary, it builds language, but it also makes them think about the sounds in the words. And it's easy to do, easy to implement, and it always is helpful for you. Also, think a little bit more when you start focusing on sorting activities. You have picture cards. You can sort picture cards by syllables. How many syllables are in this word? How many words have the same initial sound? I mean, if you have any photo cards, many classrooms have photo cards, either a photo library set or online set. Have them do some sorting activities. There's a million online too. Find some activities that you can use. Find some picture cards you can use and have your students do some sorting. It's an excellent way, easy way to incorporate it throughout the day. Thinking about even a math class and science class, if you learn a new word, think about clapping out the syllables first. What's the first sound? What's the last sound? Let them explore language because it's fun for them, and explore words, it's fun for them. And also thinking about, again, I say clap out everything. The more we do it, the better they're going to see. You're going to be amazed when you have your kinder and first grade students in the middle of a book just clapping out the words that you said, just so they can show you that they know their syllables. Awesome way to do it. And again, just like I said before with the oral blending activities, segmentation activities are another place where you can have your students take ownership. How will you use it in your classroom? How are you going to practice these sounds? Incredibly easy to do, incredibly easy to implement, and it's a great way for you to tie it in throughout the day. So remember, the idea is, how do we make this a daily event? How do we make this throughout the day? And this is just another one of those activities you can easily tie throughout the day and really help your students develop these skills, because the phonics instruction you're using isn't going to be as effective without this great phonemic awareness foundation. And then the last thing, using cards, using L-Cone boxes, using things like this to let them know. Again, remember I was talking about syllables. When you break it down even further, then you start saying how many sounds are in the word hat, how many sounds are in the word bread. That's when you get this, when you take segmentation all the way down to its core, then you start saying, okay, bread, ed. There are 4 sounds in it. We know it's B-R-E-A-D, but if we get those 4 sounds, then you can use your sound spelling cards or whatever tools you have in your classroom to direct them to, when they're spelling those words, count the sounds, look at the cards you have in your classroom and say, oh, it must be this because that's how many sounds it is. And they learn that the sounds and spellings may or may not be exactly the same, but that's okay. Those are things that are definitely okay, and that's good for them to learn and understand and grow with. So there's a ton of things we can do to help up with teaching phonological phonemic awareness throughout the day. The big thing is have fun, enjoy it. Let your students play. Let your students enjoy sounds. Let them use fake words. It's fine. The more fake words, the better. We know they're flake words, you know they're play words, but it's a great skill that a lot of students need help with. So please take the time to do that, because we know phonological and phonemic awareness are key in early reading. We have to build that foundation for our students. But remember, when you're doing these activities, fast-paced, fun, focused. It's not about what the word dinosaur is and what your favorite dinosaur is, or any of those. It's about dinosaur. What's the word dinosaur, and moving on with it. And all students can benefit. Even if you have a student that comes in your classroom that is a fluent reader in pre-K, they can benefit, because there's going to be a time that there's a gap that's noticed, that student may not understand sounds, they just call words. They're going to need these skills. And those of you that teach 4, 5, and 6, I hope you're able to see that these activities are easy to implement with any of your students. Any of your students, this is a great place to go. So again, I encourage you, as you're doing these activities in your classroom, as you work with your students, please try some of these activities. And if you need a list of more activities, just email us, and we have tons of places, a lot of resources we can send you to help you learn and implement these in your classroom in a fun and easy way. Now, I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Jenna and see what kind of questions we have in the question box. So Jenna, it's off to you.
Great, thanks, Jeff, and a great discussion in the chat comments going on right now. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and type them into the Q&A box. Jeff, we have a question from Sarah. What do you do with a student who missed this phonemic awareness and is now in 3rd grade? The student doesn't even know how to break the sounds apart or what letter is making the sound. Jeff, how would you answer that?
That's an excellent question, Sarah, and it's unfortunately it's a challenge a lot of us face. What I would do with those students in 3rd grade, I would start with the basics. I would go back into, because if they can't break the sounds and initial letters, because there's a gap that goes way further back, some of those things I talked about earlier, I would start with the most basic of activities with those students, looking at words and word parts, and again, maybe small group activities, but scaffold the learning for that student. Sarah, what I'm going to do too is I'm going to send you, I'm going to get your email. We'll get your email address. I'm going to send you a link too that may be helpful for you too, to download some quick activities you can do. I have 30 activities that you can do with your student, with that 3rd grade student, to build those phonemic awareness skills. So definitely start. My suggestion though is start basic. Start way back when I started those initial discussions on what's the most basic skill. And even if they know it, that's fine, but it's going to help them build it, because understanding the letters and the sounds aren't going to mean anything yet, because we haven't built that foundation. So that's where I'd start with there. Anything else, Jenna?
Thanks. We have another question. Should you modify phonemic awareness activities for students with learning disabilities? If so, how?
Another great question. I would yes, I would agree. You would want to modify those activities a little bit for your students' learning disabilities. Maybe give them a little bit more time to practice. Maybe give them some more processing time too. I know my classroom was a blended classroom, so I had special needs students and regular education students in my classroom. And what I found with those students was the extra practice was important. I would also look at those students and do some pre-teaching ahead of time. It doesn't hurt them to have the question, have it coming out again, letting them hear it again. So definitely one way to do it is to have them shorten the activities, repeat them, maybe even pre-teaching them, and don't do as many in one day. You're going to scaffold a little bit longer. That's what I do with those students. And I see some great email addresses popping up, so that's going to be good. I'll get your email address, I promise you, and get you information. Jenna, any other ones?
Yeah, let's see. Okay, so another question: if you have a 5th grader who may need this, are the activities appropriate for them?
Yes. 5th grade students, 4th, 5th grade students, absolutely these activities would be great for those students. Again, because we have some shorter ones that we can do with those students, we won't use the puppet with those 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students. I would use my hands a lot, or do something like this, alphabet, what's the word, things like that are fantastic ways to have our students get those activities going. Absolutely, is a great way to do it. So yes, 4th, 5th grade students, absolutely. 3rd, 4th, 5th even. it's a great thing to do. Even sixth grade it's a good activity. You can do it with them. Absolutely. Any other ones out there?
Okay, I've got a couple more questions coming in. Let's see. So Nancy asks, medial short vowels E and I in consonant-vowel-consonant words often cause young learners difficulty distinguishing between the two sounds and the letter-sound correspondence. Any ideas, Jeff?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to find and read that question again because I want to make sure I get that. I just lost it. Medial short vowel words, Medial short vowels, E and I, series are often cause young words to distinguish two sounds, letter sound corresponding. All right, Nancy. Nancy had a great question about those medial, the medial short vowels, E and I, and how they are challenging for students. And I, or think about your mouth when you make those sounds. One thing I would suggest with those students is, someone even suggested earlier using the mirror. I think the mirror is a great way to do that. Because you pull your mouth back, and you're not doing it. You're not pulling it back. You're not smiling when you and So that's one way to do it. Is I would use a mirror to help those students, because that'll help them see how the sounds work a little bit differently. I'd also space out when we're teaching those sounds. Focus on one sound first, and then focus on the initial sound first, and then wait a little bit before you move the other sound in. That's how I'd work those two in. Because you're right, those are challenging. Hit and hat, or get and get are challenging sometimes. Absolutely. And I'm getting your email addresses. So those of you that are putting your email address down, we are going to have the link. And some of you are going to be surprised you already have this, but I'm going to send it to everyone so you guys have a link to get this stuff. Absolutely. I'll pass to Jenna again.
Okay, Jeff. Okay, it looks like we're getting close to time here, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I want to thank everyone for attending the webinar today, and also thank you, Jeff, for presenting. Everyone, we will be sending a follow-up email with a link to the recording as well as the PDFs of the slides. And if we didn't get to your question in the Q&A box, we will definitely follow up with you, as well as all of the emails that you guys are providing in the chat and the Q&A. So thanks again for attending, and thanks again to Jeff. Have a great day and rest of the week.